In this last video for chapter one, week one, I wanted to talk to you. There is a section in the lecture study guide that says biology today. This is not a numbered section in chapter one, but it's just a little side topic, and I think it's really interesting. It's important in biology, and it's kind of a fun story. It's a great example of the scientific method. So starting in the 80s, these two scientists, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, I think they're Australian, were doing research on studying um, gastritis, which is inflammation of the lining of the stomach, and stomach ulcers. Now, if I asked you right now, like what causes stomach ulcers, I'm sure there'd still be some folks that said, stress. Oh, stress causes stomach ulcers. And frankly, when I was a kid, that was what everybody thought. You know, people ate Tums and things like that and tried to relax and so they wouldn't get stomach ulcers. When they did get a stomach ulcers, it was like, oh, go, go relax, reduce stress in your life. Well, these guys kind of started looking at stomach ulcer tissue under the microscope, and this guy, Robin Warren, noticed that around this tissue where there was inflammation and ulcers forming, he'd often see these squiggly bacteria. And that was kind of funny because the common belief at the time, and actually even, for quite a while before that and beyond that, people thought that the stomach was free of microorganisms. So the fact that he would consistently see this in particularly a certain kind of bacteria, this squiggly bacteria, he'd see that under the microscope. He um, he thought that was quite funny, and he teamed up with Barry Marshall, and Barry Marshall was the physician out there dealing with the patients, and together they came up with the hypothesis that that this bacteria was actually causing the stomach ulcers. Now you can imagine this is going to be kind of tricky because the possibilities would be that the bacteria is there as a result of the stomach ulcer. Maybe it attracts that kind of bacteria or something. But they were thinking that the bacteria um, were causing the stomach ulcer. So here we have the observation that you can see these bacteria associated with stomach inflammation and stomach ulcers. The hypothesis that these bacteria, and they were the first to identify this bacteria, they called it Helicobacter pylori. It was helical shape, it was kind of squiggly, and pylori refers to pyloric, stomach, the stomach. So they called this bacteria Helicobacter pylori. So their hypothesis is Helicobacter pylori causes stomach ulcers. And so they started doing all sorts of experiments. One of the things they did is they found an antibiotic that kills Helicobacter pylori. Um, and so, and they did all sorts of other studies in animals and things to demonstrate that this bacteria caused stomach ulcers. They were having a little bit of trouble finding an animal that the bacteria grew really well in. It turns out that, bacteria can be unique to certain animals, and they seem to grow better in humans than other organisms. So their experiments were going along pretty well, but they really needed the final experiment, the definitive experiment. And that would be to get a healthy person to get develop a Helicobacter pylori infection and then develop a stomach ulcer. And it's kind of hard just to find somebody that's happening to, because you usually only find them by the time they've gotten the stomach ulcer. And it's also kind of unethical to go get people and infect them with bacteria that might make them sick. So Barry Marshall decided he was going to just take it into his own hands. And he convinced another buddy in the lab, decided that we're going to grow some of this bacteria and we're going to drink it. And they did. In fact, I read an article where he reported on his thinking behind this and all, and he said neither one of them told their wives. They knew their wives would be very upset with them. But one night in the lab, Barry Marshall and another guy in the lab decided that we're going to drink this Helicobacter pylori. And they did it. And after a few days, or, maybe a week or so, their stomach started bothering them. And they took biopsies and samples, and they got Robin Warren involved, and they showed that these bacteria were causing gastritis, inflammation of the stomach tissue, which is a precursor to the um, to getting a stomach ulcer. Fortunately, they had done experiments where they knew they had antibiotics that could kill this bacteria. So what they were able to do is they showed that killing this bacteria, they took some of the antibiotics, killing the bacteria stopped their gastritis and stopped their infection. So they were able to definitively prove that Helicobacter pylori causes stomach ulcers, not stress. And for that they won the Nobel Prize in 2005. And it sounds like well, that's a nice experiment, but why win the Nobel Prize for that? It really changed the way that people think about bacteria, and you're probably more used to it now, but in at their time before that, we didn't think about bacteria and kind of chronic diseases like stomach ulcers. But now we're getting a lot more into thinking about how do bacteria contribute to things like diabetes and ulcers, and I mean ulcers, obesity, different, how do bacteria in our system contribute to mental health and all sorts of things. So they really started a whole new understanding of the role of microorganisms in chronic disease. And and there you go. That's a story of discovery of how Helicobacter pylori causes stomach ulcers. Oh, here it says familiarize yourself with Koch's postulates. I actually took that out, so we're not going to do that. Anyway, that's it.